I folded the last of my childhood photos into a cardboard box, my hands trembling slightly as I taped it shut. The room that had been mine for 26 years suddenly felt foreign, stripped of everything that made it home. Just 3 hours ago, my parents had casually announced they were doubling my rent from $400 to $800 a month. The reason to help fund my younger brother Dylan's music career dreams. As I looked around the bare walls, I felt something crack inside my chest. This was not the first time I had been pushed aside for the golden child, but it would definitely be the last. Before I dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if this resonates with you. Because what happened next will show you exactly what occurs when parents push their responsible child too far. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home, the hierarchy was crystal clear from day one. My father Richard, a 55-year-old accountant with graying temples, and my mother Patricia, a 52-year-old registered nurse, had always made their preferences obvious through their actions, even if they would never admit it out loud. I was the eldest at 26, and from as early as I could remember, independence was not just expected, but demanded. While other kids my age were getting allowances, I was working part-time at the local grocery store from 16, saving every penny for college. My report cards filled with A's were met with brief nods, while Dylan's C-plus efforts earned celebration dinners at his favorite restaurant. Dylan, now 23, had been the center of our universe since birth. Where I learned responsibility through chores and expectations, he learned that dreams were more important than reality. Our parents fed into his fantasy of becoming the next big musical sensation, buying him every instrument he desired, and dismissing any suggestion that he might need a backup plan. I still remember my 18th birthday, a day that perfectly summarized my place in the family hierarchy. I'd been looking forward to it for months, imagining a small celebration with homemade cake and maybe a few friends over. Instead, I spent the evening alone in my room while the family attended Dylan's coffee shop performance across town. When they returned 3 hours later with leftover cake from the venue, my mother kissed my forehead and whispered a distracted "Happy birthday, sweetheart," before launching into an enthusiastic recap of Dylan's 15-minute set. The pattern continued through college. While I worked 2 jobs and applied for every scholarship available to fund my marketing degree, Dylan received a brand new $3,000 Gibson guitar for his 19th birthday. When I finally graduated with honors and $60,000 in student loans, the family celebration lasted exactly one dinner. When Dylan landed a gig playing background music at a local wedding, they threw him a party. At 24, fresh out of college with my marketing degree and a starting position at a small advertising firm making $45,000 a year, I faced the harsh reality of student loan payments and big city rent prices. My parents, seemingly out of nowhere, suggested I move back home temporarily to save money and pay down my debt faster. The offer seemed reasonable: $400 a month for my childhood bedroom, which included utilities but not meals. Looking back now, I should have recognized the red flags immediately. What parents charge their struggling recent graduate child rent to live at home? But I was desperate to tackle my loans aggressively, and $400 was significantly less than any apartment I could find within commuting distance of my job. The arrangement came with an actual written lease agreement, something that struck me as odd at the time. My father presented it matter-of-factly, explaining that it would help with their tax situation. I signed without much thought, grateful for what seemed like a family helping hand during a difficult transition period. Life in my childhood home as an adult tenant proved to be an eye-opening experience. I lived like a respectful boarder, buying and preparing my own meals, doing my own laundry, and maintaining my space without interfering with the household routine. I kept to my room most evenings, video calling friends or working on freelance marketing projects to supplement my income. Meanwhile, Dylan continued living like royalty. Our mother prepared his favorite meals, washed and folded his clothes, and cleaned his disaster of a bedroom weekly. His days consisted of sleeping until noon, playing guitar for a few hours, and heading out with friends most evenings. Any mention of employment or contributing to household expenses was met with lectures about not understanding the artistic process. During my second month back home, I began overhearing hushed conversations between my parents after they thought I had gone to bed. Fragments of worried discussions about credit card balances and unexpected expenses drifted up through the old house's thin walls. I caught mentions of studio rental fees and equipment purchases that seemed to correlate directly with Dylan's latest musical endeavors. His bedroom, located directly below mine, became a constant source of noise as he acquired an endless stream of new equipment. First came the professional-grade microphone and audio interface. Then the amplifier that rattled the windows when he practiced. Most recently, expensive recording software and a full drum kit that made the house shake during his afternoon creativity sessions. I watched my parents' faces grow more strained as Dylan's requests became bolder and more frequent. They would exchange glances across the dinner table when he mentioned needing money for studio time or networking events, but they always found a way to make it happen. The tension in the house grew thicker by the week, though everyone pretended everything was perfectly normal. The conversation that would change everything happened on a Friday evening in late September. I had just returned from work, looking forward to a quiet weekend of catching up on personal projects and maybe visiting some college friends. As I headed toward the stairs, my father's voice called from the living room with an unusual formality that immediately put me on edge. "Savannah, could you join us in here for a moment? We need to discuss something important." The scene in the living room felt like a family intervention. My parents sat stiffly on the couch, their faces wearing expressions I had seen before during serious family discussions. Dylan occupied the armchair across from them, his usual confident demeanor replaced with nervous fidgeting and averted eyes. My father cleared his throat and launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "We need to talk about our family's financial situation and how we can all contribute to supporting each other's goals." My mother jumped in with forced enthusiasm, explaining that Dylan had been presented with an incredible opportunity. A local music producer had offered to work with him on a professional recording project, complete with studio time and marketing support. The investment required was $15,000, money that would launch Dylan's career and potentially provide returns for the entire family. The catch, they explained with careful word choice, was that the family budget was stretched thin. They needed to find creative ways to generate the additional income necessary to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. After much consideration, they had decided that adjusting my rent contribution would be the most logical solution. "We are raising your monthly rent from $400 to $800. My father announced, his tone suggesting this was a reasonable business decision rather than a family betrayal. "This will help us support Dylan's career development while still giving you an affordable place to live." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what they were suggesting. In their minds, I was not their daughter seeking temporary support during a difficult financial period. I was a tenant whose rent could be arbitrarily doubled to fund their favorite child's pipe dreams. My shock quickly transformed into anger as the full picture became clear. "So let me understand this correctly," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "You want to double my rent so you can give Dylan another handout for his music hobby?" Dylan finally spoke up, his voice defensive and whiny. "It is not a hobby, Savannah. This is a real career opportunity. You just do not understand what it takes to make it in the music industry. Sometimes you have to invest in yourself." The irony was not lost on me. Dylan lecturing about investment and career development while living rent-free in his childhood bedroom, supported entirely by our parents' increasingly strained finances. I had been investing in myself since I was 16 years old, working multiple jobs to pay for college and starting my career with nothing but determination and student loan debt. The conversation spiraled into a heated argument as months of suppressed resentment finally erupted. I confronted them about the obvious favoritism that had defined my entire childhood. My parents responded with guilt trips about family loyalty and supporting each other through difficult times. Dylan alternated between self-pity and accusations that I was jealous of his artistic talents. As the argument intensified, shocking truths began to emerge. My mother, in a moment of frustrated honesty, revealed that they had already borrowed $30,000 against the house to fund Dylan's previous musical ventures. The recording equipment, studio rentals, and networking events I had been observing were just the visible portion of a much larger financial disaster. My father admitted they were behind on several credit card payments and struggling to manage the home equity loan they had taken out the previous year. The $800 they wanted from me was not just about supporting Dylan's newest project. It was about preventing their financial house of cards from collapsing entirely. The realization that I had been unknowingly subsidizing this dysfunction for months made me physically nauseous. My rent payments had been helping to service debt they had accumulated funding Dylan's fantasies. I was not living at home as their daughter receiving family support. I was a source of income being exploited to enable their poor financial decisions. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The walls that had once represented safety and belonging now felt like a prison. I called my college roommate Jessica, who lived 3 states away, but had remained my closest friend through the years. Through tears, I explained the entire situation. Jessica listened without judgment before delivering the wake-up call I desperately needed. Savannah, you deserve so much better than this. You have been carrying this family financially and emotionally for years, and they are taking advantage of your kindness. You have the power to change this situation. Her words resonated in a way that surprised me. For the first time, I seriously considered the possibility of leaving. I opened my laptop and began researching apartment rentals in my area, shocked to discover that I had more options than I had realized. My income had increased over the past year, and my credit score was excellent thanks to years of responsible financial management. By 3 o'clock in the morning, I had made a decision that would change the trajectory of my entire life. Saturday morning arrived with unusual clarity about what I needed to do. I called in sick to work claiming a family emergency that was not entirely untrue, and began executing a plan I had formulated during my sleepless night. My parents had gone to their weekly farmers market routine, and Dylan was predictably unconscious until well past noon. I drove to 3 different apartment complexes before finding exactly what I needed: a studio apartment in a safe neighborhood 15 minutes closer to my office than my parents' house. At $1,200 a month, it was expensive but manageable with my current income. The property manager, impressed by my credit score and employment verification, approved my application on the spot. I signed the lease agreement, paid the security deposit and first month's rent, and scheduled my move-in date for the following weekend. The feeling of signing my own lease with my own money for my own space was intoxicating. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving towards something positive rather than just surviving day to day. The next week passed in a blur of secret preparation. I researched moving companies, ordered basic furniture for delivery to my new address, and opened a new bank account to ensure my parents could not track my financial activities. I purchased everything I would need to start: fresh kitchen supplies, bedding towels, and cleaning products. At work, I approached my supervisor about transitioning some of my responsibilities to remote work. I explained that I was dealing with a difficult family situation and needed flexibility during the transition period. My boss, who had been consistently pleased with my performance, readily agreed to let me work from home 2 days a week. By Friday, everything was in place. I had reserved a small moving truck, recruited 2 coworker friends to help with the heavy lifting, and planned my escape down to the smallest detail. My parents still had no idea what was coming. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, perfect weather for the dramatic exit I had planned. My parents left early for their usual weekend errands, and Dylan was still buried under his blankets when I heard the moving truck pull into our driveway at 8 o'clock sharp. My friends arrived precisely on time, and we worked with military efficiency to load my belongings. Years of living like a tenant in my own family home meant that my possessions were already well organized and easy to pack. We moved systematically through my room, removing every trace of my presence. The irony was not lost on me that my entire adult life fit easily into a 10-foot moving truck. While Dylan's room overflowed with expensive equipment and clothes, he never paid for everything I owned could be transported in a single trip. Dylan stumbled downstairs around 10:30, drawn by the noise of furniture being moved. His confusion quickly turned to panic as he realized what was happening. "Savannah, what are you doing? Where are you going?" "This is crazy." I continued directing my friends while responding calmly to his questions. "I am moving out. I found my own place. You can tell Mom and Dad when they get home." Dylan frantically called our parents, his voice high-pitched with anxiety. Within 20 minutes, both of their cars were speeding into the driveway. I watched through the window as they rushed toward the house, their faces displaying a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. The confrontation that followed took place in our front yard, adding a layer of public spectacle that made everything feel even more final. My mother alternated between tears and anger, demanding to know how I could abandon the family during such a difficult time. My father tried to negotiate, offering to reduce the rent increase and work out a payment plan for Dylan's expenses. I stood my ground with a calmness that surprised even me. I am not abandoning anyone. I am choosing not to be financially exploited by my own family anymore. You want to fund Dylan's dreams? Find another way to do it. I refuse to subsidize his lifestyle while being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. The neighbors had begun to notice the commotion, adding pressure for a quick resolution. My parents made increasingly desperate promises about treating me more fairly and reconsidering their financial priorities. Dylan even offered to get a part-time job, though we all knew that promise would last exactly as long as it took for the moving truck to disappear. I hugged each of them goodbye, surprised by how little sadness I felt. The grief I expected was replaced by an overwhelming sense of liberation. As the truck pulled away from the house where I had spent 26 years learning that my worth was conditional on my usefulness, I felt like I was finally coming alive. The next few weeks tested every boundary I had learned to establish. My parents called daily, alternating between guilt trips and genuine apologies. They sent care packages to my new address filled with my favorite homemade cookies and handwritten notes expressing their regret about the way things had ended. Dylan showed up at my office twice, causing enough of a scene that my supervisor had to intervene. His attempts to guilt me back home became increasingly desperate as the reality of contributing to household expenses became unavoidable. Our parents had apparently decided that if I was not available to subsidize his lifestyle, he would need to find alternative arrangements. Learning to say no became my most valuable skill during this transition period. Every phone call and text message was an opportunity to practice setting boundaries and maintaining the independence I had worked so hard to achieve. It was exhausting at first, but gradually became empowering as I realized that my family could not force me to return to a situation that was harmful to my well-being. My work performance improved dramatically as I no longer carried the constant stress of family financial drama. My supervisor noticed the positive change and began assigning me more challenging projects with higher visibility within the company. For the first time since college, I felt like my efforts were being recognized and rewarded appropriately. The studio apartment that had seemed small and sparse during my initial viewing began to feel like a sanctuary as I added personal touches and established new routines. Grocery shopping for one person, decorating according to my own taste, and controlling my own schedule became daily reminders of the freedom I had gained through my difficult decision. 2 months after my dramatic departure, the positive changes in my life had exceeded every expectation I had dared to hold. My supervisor called me into her office on a Tuesday morning with news that would validate every risk I had taken. Due to my consistently outstanding performance and increased client satisfaction scores, I was being promoted to assistant marketing manager with an immediate salary increase to $55,000 annually. The promotion came with additional responsibilities that challenged me in ways I had never experienced. Leading team meetings, developing strategic campaigns, and mentoring junior staff members revealed talents I had never had the opportunity to develop while living under the constant stress of family dysfunction. My confidence grew with each successful project completion. Outside of work, I began building the social life I had neglected during my years of trying to manage family drama. I joined a yoga studio near my apartment where the Saturday morning classes became a cornerstone of my new routine. The instructor, a woman named Amanda, who radiated the kind of inner peace I was learning to cultivate, suggested I try their meditation workshops. Through yoga class, I met Sarah and Jennifer, two women in their early 30s who were navigating their own family boundary challenges. Our post-class coffee conversations evolved into genuine friendships built on mutual support and shared experiences of learning to prioritize our own well-being over dysfunctional family expectations. My apartment, which had initially felt like temporary refuge, transformed into a true home as I invested time and money in creating a space that reflected my personality rather than my family's preferences. I painted the walls a calming sage green hung artwork that made me smile and arranged furniture to maximize both comfort and productivity. Cooking for myself became an unexpected source of joy and creativity. Without the pressure of navigating family meal dynamics or accommodating Dylan's picky eating habits, I experimented with cuisines and recipes that matched my own tastes. My small kitchen became the heart of my new life, where I prepared healthy meals while listening to podcasts about personal development and financial independence. The financial benefits of my decision became increasingly apparent as months passed. Without the burden of subsidizing Dylan's lifestyle through inflated rent payments, I was able to make aggressive payments toward my student loans while still building an emergency fund. For the first time since graduation, I felt financially secure and optimistic about my future prospects. Meanwhile, the consequences of my departure were becoming apparent in my family's household. My parents were struggling to manage their expenses without the $800 they had planned to extract from me monthly. My father had taken a part-time job doing tax preparation on weekends, adding stress to his already demanding full-time schedule. My mother's nursing shifts increased as they attempted to generate the income they needed to service their debt obligations. The strain was evident in our occasional phone conversations, where she sounded increasingly exhausted and overwhelmed by responsibilities she had never had to shoulder independently. Dylan's music career dreams faced harsh reality without the financial safety net my parents had previously provided. The expensive recording project that had precipitated the rent increase never materialized as the family could no longer afford the studio fees. His equipment began appearing on online marketplace platforms as he was forced to sell instruments to contribute to household expenses. Most surprisingly, Dylan actually found part-time employment at a local music store. His calls to me shifted from manipulation and guilt trips to genuine conversations about the challenges of balancing work with creative pursuits. For the first time in our adult relationship, he seemed to understand that financial independence required actual effort rather than just good intentions. 3 months after my move, I received an email from my mother that represented a fundamental shift in our family dynamic. Instead of the usual guilt-laden messages about missing me and hoping I would reconsider my decision, she wrote a thoughtful apology, acknowledging the ways they had taken advantage of my reliability and generosity. She admitted that they had become so accustomed to my willingness to sacrifice my own needs for family harmony that they had forgotten to consider my well-being as a priority. The financial crisis that followed my departure had forced them to confront the unsustainability of their previous approach to supporting Dylan's ambitions. My father's separate email was shorter but equally meaningful. He acknowledged that charging me rent while expecting me to subsidize Dylan's lifestyle had been fundamentally unfair. He expressed pride in my independence and success emotions he had rarely voiced during my childhood, when my achievements were overshadowed by Dylan's need for attention and validation. I found myself feeling genuine compassion for my family's struggles without any desire to return to my previous role as their financial and emotional caretaker. Their apologies felt sincere, but the lessons I had learned about boundaries and self-respect were too valuable to abandon for the comfort of familiar dysfunction. The relationship I was building with myself during this period of independence was the most important connection I had ever cultivated. Through therapy, meditation, and honest self-reflection, I was discovering parts of my personality that had been suppressed for years under the weight of family expectations and responsibilities. I learned to recognize the difference between love and obligation, between supporting others and enabling destructive behavior. The guilt I had carried for years about prioritizing my own needs began to dissolve as I experienced the positive outcomes of healthy boundary setting. Most importantly, I discovered that walking away from people who consistently treated me poorly was not selfish or cruel. It was an act of self-respect that created space for healthier relationships and opportunities for growth that would never have been possible, while I remained trapped in patterns that diminished my worth. As I sat in my cozy apartment on a Sunday evening surrounded by the life I had created through my own choices and efforts, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the courage I had found to leave a situation that was slowly destroying my sense of self-worth. The loneliness I had feared would overwhelm me had been replaced by a deep satisfaction with my own company and excitement about future possibilities. The phone calls from home became less frequent and more pleasant as everyone adjusted to the new dynamic. Dylan shared updates about his job and his more realistic approach to his musical interests. My parents talked about their own struggles and successes without expecting me to solve their problems or sacrifice my own stability for their poor decisions. I maintained contact with my family, but on my own terms and according to my own schedule. The relationship was healthier because it was no longer based on my willingness to accept unfair treatment in exchange for their approval. They were learning to value me as an independent adult rather than a resource to be exploited during difficult times. 6 months after leaving home, I realized that the most important lesson from my experience was not about family relationships or financial independence. It was about recognizing that some situations, no matter how familiar or comfortable they might seem, are fundamentally incompatible with our growth and well being. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is to remove ourselves from environments where we are not valued appropriately. Sometimes the people who should protect and support us are the ones we most need protection from. And sometimes, walking away from what is familiar is the only path toward what is possible. The scared young woman who had signed that lease agreement in her childhood bedroom would hardly recognize the confident person I had become. Every challenge I faced independently, from assembling furniture to navigating workplace politics, reinforced my capability and strengthened my trust in my own judgment. As I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point, I realized that my family's decision to raise my rent had been an unexpected gift. It forced me to recognize that I was worth more than the treatment I had been accepting, and gave me the motivation to create a life that reflected my true value rather than their distorted perception of my role. Looking toward the future, I felt excitement about possibilities that would never have existed if I had remained in a situation where my primary function was to enable other people's poor choices. The dreams I had postponed while managing family drama were finally becoming achievable goals with concrete steps toward realization. I understand now that not all families deserve unlimited access to our lives and resources, regardless of blood relationship. Love should enhance our well-being rather than diminish it, and loyalty should be mutual rather than one-sided. The most important relationship we will ever have is the one we build with ourselves, and protecting that relationship sometimes requires difficult choices that prioritize long-term growth over short-term comfort. And I realize that sometimes the family we need is not the one we were born into, but the one we choose to create through our own values and boundaries. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? How did you handle the guilt and pressure that comes with setting boundaries with people you love? Share your experiences in the comments below, because your story might help someone else who is struggling with a similar situation. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and building the life you deserve. Do not forget to share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing that it is okay to put themselves first sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you are worthy of respect and love, especially from the people closest to you. Until next time, keep choosing yourself.